U.S. Marine, former pilot. Uh, he was one of the first operational pilots of the V-22, and he also flew the H-1 Cobra. Warren, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, good morning. Boy, I'm the first up, huh? So no pressure.
None at all. Yeah, if you can just tell us your story, walk us through uh, your transaction out of the military, and give us a little history on yourself. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And please, like all this stuff, if there's something I'm saying, someone has a question on, please ask. This is meant for you guys, certainly not for me. But it is an honor, right? It's been 7 years. It seems like a lifetime ago since I retired and transitioned out. And I think that's what most of you are going through right now. As Carp mentioned, 22 years, Cobras, V-22s. Had the honor of being a commanding officer out in San Diego. Did last 4 years with SOCOM. I'm running through this quickly because this is all stuff that you guys do. I will tell you though, what I miss the most, and what I think most people do, and you probably hear this repeated, is the people, the culture of the U.S. military and the teams we had. It's definitely not the brochures, but I do miss the individual service member, in my case, the Marines. Okay, but what's important afterwards, right? Like, so what did I do when I transitioned? And again, stop me if you have any questions. I'll be real honest, and I'm guessing a lot of you are in the same position. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, right? I attended these, seminars, and people gave me skill sets, and this is what you should do. I had no idea. I was almost like a Forrest Gump, kind of just falling into stuff initially. And I can talk about the right approach, and I will in a bit, different than what I did. But I knew I didn't want to fly commercially. I was a pilot. I didn't want to fly for the airlines. And for me specifically, a lot of my friends went into government positions. I didn't want to do that. I was envious of those two groups of people because they knew what they wanted and I didn't. So I immediately took a job offer initially as what's called a site director for a company called Icon Aircraft. They build, they manufacture aircraft, really neat aircraft. And so I was going to manage, some pilots, manage some maintenance activities and some client engagements, which was a really nice transition from what I did in the military. I'll talk about the first opportunity you get in a bit and how you should look at that because I think that's for me, it was the biggest eye-opening experience. And if I look back and I could, after action, how I approached my first opportunity and where that would take me. But I'll jump on that in a bit once I get through what I've done post-retirement. But okay, so I joined as a site director, and then about 7 months later, they came to me and said, "Do you want to create, grow an East Coast sales team? You'll be the senior director of sales on the East Coast." I never wanted to be in sales. Honestly, the thought of it made my stomach kind of churn. I didn't know anything about sales, but I took the leap. And you'll hear me when I talk about transitioning and taking the leap, right? And not having a parachute and put it together on your way down. But I took the leap. And after about a 5 year stint with Icon Aircraft, by the time I left there, 4 or 5 years, so I started as a site director, East Coast sales director. When I left 4 years later, I was the global vice president of sales, marketing, maintenance support, client support, flight training, you name it, right? So really took a lot of leaps. And again, I'll go back to that on how you view that first opportunity and getting your foot in the door at a company. But I grew really quickly, and I'll talk later about how that applies to earnings. Which in the private sector it is what it is. Earnings is a huge part of that, right? How much do you make? So I'll talk about that growth as well. Um, at Icon, I was offered the CEO position for a whole host of reasons. You guys can ask me later. I turned that down, the CEO position, and I instead launched my own company. So, and people can ask me later of what that's like starting your own company. But it was a blank piece of paper. Me and two other co-founders, we put our own money into it. And that company still exists. And we basically grew it into about 45 folks around the globe that provide technical representation and technical support when people purchase private jets around the world. So that sales transaction is pretty complicated, as you can imagine. We really focus more on the maintenance and aircraft status for that sales transaction, but that company still exists. It wasn't something that excited me. I love the business model. I thought it was neat to start your own company, so I did it, and I'm glad I did. But they knew I had about 2 years doing that, and then I was going to do something else. I got lucky where Skyryse, the company I'm currently sitting at right now, they called. Skyryse, you probably haven't heard of them. It's still pre-revenue startup, but they've been around for 10 years. Essentially, I won't go into details, but they build a hardware software stack to essentially put an operating system into any aircraft, right? So we've done that for privately owned helicopters. We're doing that in a Black Hawk right now. We're going into fixed wing aircraft. So, but when they called me, they had no commercial footprint. They were, kind of, and I'm being facetious, but they were basically tinkering around in a garage, building this for the last 10 years. And they brought someone like me in to eventually get the voice, really, how do we enter the market? How do we go to market? How do we start building up a revenue pipeline once we get certified? And that's what I've done here at Skyryse. So really, since retirement and doing the things I did in the military, it's been, oh man, 8 years now. Is that right? Oh my gosh, 8 years. It's been 8 years. And really what I fell into was a sales marketing leader. Obviously aerospace, right? That's my background. But a sales and marketing leader inside of aerospace, which by the way, 8 years ago, if you would have asked me, would have been the furthest and last thing I would have projected myself to get into. So again, some of this stuff I'll go back to in a bit. But to recap, I was different than some of my contemporaries and some of my friends, right? I took risk. That's not for everyone. I have plenty of friends with amazing post-military careers that took less risk, and that fit them. But what I talk about is really what I want to get into. I'll pause in a second, is, based on my perspective and my transition, what are things that you all bring to private sector? What are kind of the minefields in the private sector? And some recommendations on how you approach going into your job search, because I do a lot of interviews, I get a lot of resumes, and it's interesting now. My perspective is not 180 out, but it's definitely different than it was when I was in your position. But before I get into a lot of those perspectives, which is I think what you want to hear, kind of the not so much the Warren Curry story, but the Warren Curry perspective based on what I did, I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
Warren, there was a question in the chat. They want to know what unit you commanded.
Oh, okay. I commanded kind of a neat story, a squadron called VMM 561. So around 2009, and I say this, listen, I love the Marine Corps, and Carb knows that, right? Around 2008, 2009, the Marine Corps said, okay, all these wars are going on. We're going to grow squadrons in the Marine Corps. We're getting bigger. So they created squadrons, and VMM 561 didn't exist when I got selected to command. I remember seeing the squadron on the message board and saying to myself, what is 561? I've never heard of it. So it was a unique opportunity where, when I showed up, and this is not being exaggeratory, I was in an empty hangar. I was the first member of 561. I was in a coffee table and a folding chair. There wasn't a piece of equipment. There wasn't a pilot. There wasn't a maintainer. There wasn't an aircraft. There wasn't anything. And I kind of grew that from scratch to include the logo and the name of the squadron, you name it. Well, fast forward, as I'm in command, about a year into my 2 year command, the Marine Corps decided, you know what, we're not going to grow, we're going to shrink. And I think we all can kind of chuckle because we've been through these iterations. So the Marine Corps shrinks and they tell me, hey, your squadron's still going to exist, but we're going to send everyone and all the assets to Japan. And we're simply going to rename it from a squadron, rightfully so, that's been around for decades. So I was the first and only commanding officer of VMM 561. Long answer, but kind of a unique story.
Derek, you have your hand raised.
Hey Warren, how you doing? Derek Welch here.
Good.
So I had a couple questions for you, right? The main thing is a lot of us that are in here have like a long time. Some of us have a couple of decades in the military, right? So how do you take that, especially because a lot of us are doing full pivots, just like you did, into a different field? How do you take that and make yourself marketable towards a an industry that you're not used to being in? Like how am I? So I'll give you an example. For
Yeah,
example,
please.
right? I was a flight deck aircraft director on the flight deck of aircraft carriers. Uh, and I decided that I wanted to pivot into something that sits behind a computer where I'm warm because of, very specific reasons, right? Because I was outside for
Amen.
20 years, right? In any case, I decided that I wanted to do cybersecurity. So I have my associates in cybersecurity and I have my security plus. But I don't have any experience in doing any of that. But I have 20 years of military experience of leadership and all of this other stuff. So how do you take that and turn it into something that's marketable for that field or in any field, really?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I hope Derek and the rest of the audience, I'm going to be sometimes brutally honest, right? Because I think that's what we all need to hear. So one of the things I was going to talk about, which highlights what you did, because I did similar. Now I stayed in the same sort of industry, but I really reinvented myself in sales and marketing. Um, you are going to have to realize that your leadership, your decision-making ability, your discipline, your resilience is going to be attractive, regardless of what field you get into. But you just stated it, your background, all these companies are looking for is ROI. Okay, I'll just be really honest. When I'm interviewing something, I'm thinking, how does this individual benefit us for revenue, for objectives, you name it, right? And as you stated, right now, you don't have the 10, 15 years experience to put on a resume. And you know that and they know that. So my advice is, and I'll harken back to the icon, which I said I would before, take the leap. You're going to have to accept a position and probably a dollar amount and a roles and responsibility, which you are way more capable than doing. I'll be real honest. The companies will take out an insurance policy on you essentially and say, hey, we think Derek's going to be this, but we're not certain because he doesn't have 10, 15 years. He is transitioning out of the military. Some people transition better than others. And so we're going to kind of almost lower that both salary and job position wise, and that's our insurance policy. But it's not bad. And I'll tell you, I'm not going to give dollar amounts out, but when I took that position at Icon, looking back, it was laughable at my salary and the roles and responsibility. Within 4 years, I think I got five different promotions and I three times my income. Right. So you'll have to almost, and I see this a lot with friends, and that's why I'm emphasizing this. It is frustrating. I get it, right? Because you're like, I can do so much more. I'm so much more capable. I have so much more to offer. And you do. But you almost, if you have the right opportunity, and that's what I'm going to heart, if you have the right opportunity with the right company, the right culture, the right team, um, take the risk on yourself. And it's temporary pain. I get it. I recognize that. But what I'll tell you, vastly different in the private sector, and you guys have probably heard this than the government, when you prove yourself, you climb up a ladder incredibly quick. There are no, I got to wait for this year, or I got to wait for this person to retire. That doesn't go away. They see value. You start bringing return to that company. You will very quickly go up the food chain, both in responsibilities and roles, which we all want, right? We're military. We like that responsibility. We want to be accountable. We want to take charge. But that also comes with, uh, an increased salary, which again, in the private sector, I hate to say it this way, it comes down to a lot to that, right? So I would tell you, the bottom line is accept the fact that you're jumping. There's going to be almost a couple steps back as far as what you're capable of doing, but you will very quickly make all those steps forward, and you'll look back 5, 6 years from now and say, 100% worth the jump, 100% worth the me eating a little bit of humble pie for, 6, 12, maybe even 18 months, because look where I'm at now. I can guarantee you if you perform, that will happen.
That's awesome, Warren. I do appreciate all of that. The thing I think that scares the most people is the fact that, we don't know where to look for that kind of jump, and I'm sitting here like I know it's a gold mine, dude. Like I know I have everything that I have to offer is a gold mine, but who am I talking to? Like who are the people that I'm talking to, to
Yeah.
get these jobs?
Now you get me excited, right? And here's where you see the new sales guy, right? The recreated Marine Warren. So this is one of the hardest things. And by the way, sometimes do as I say, not as I do, because I still struggle with this. And it's because, over 2 decades in the Marine Corps didn't teach me this. You've probably heard this, and I'm telling you it's true, and I got to learn it all the time. You really have to prospect and network. Like, and I know you're like, okay, what does that mean? I mean, it's almost a full-time job. So when I'm looking at transitioning, my different few jumps, right? I get home from work, I grab dinner, and I'm spending 3 to 4 hours prospecting, looking at the industry, looking at openings. And by the way, you hear this, most companies aren't putting all their openings out there. They're just not, right? So it's okay to reach out and say, wow, look at this company, look what they're doing, look how they're growing. And you have to prospect and figure out who are the what I call the champions and decision makers. Who are the champions inside that organization that I can network with? I can connect on LinkedIn, right? That gives me that introduction to someone or tells me is willing to spend 30 minutes on a phone and tell me what's going on in the company. Then who are the decision makers? And this is true in my new role of sales, right? You have to prospect and reach out. And I'll be honest, you're going to get way more no's and way more ignores than you are any responses or, yeah, let's jump on a call. Just accept it. Like I tell, it's very similar to sales. I tell my young sales rep, here's an example, but it ties into this because you really are selling yourself. You are selling. I say, if your commission for selling a product's $100, and 99 people just told you no or ignored you, and the 100 person gives you a sale, everyone that said no put a dollar in your pocket, right? So you are going to get more no's, you're going to get more ignores. By the way, ignores, don't just do it once. I'm going to say this and I'm kind of embarrassed. I bet you if I look at my inbox, I probably have 5,700 unread emails. Listen, in the private sector, it is crazy out here. And if you're reaching decision makers, they are really busy and their schedule's jammed. And so a non-response isn't that they don't care, it's you caught them at the wrong time, right? They could be traveling, they could be at a conference, they could have a busy week of board meetings, you name it. So prospect the hell out of it and get really comfortable. And I'm going to say this to myself of putting yourself out there. And it's not in our nature. I get it, right? But you really, I was told it multiple times, but you really have to, it's a numbers game. It's a quality numbers game, but it's a numbers game. And you're going to have to reach out to 100 people to get a couple yeses, or maybe 10 yeses to get a couple conversations, to get an interview, to get a job. And the last thing I'll say is really do research. So when you reach out to someone, repeat what they're saying, not verbatim, clearly, right? But repeat what they're saying, right? Like, it's hey, we're going in this direction and this is, our type of team and really research the company. So when you're writing, everything you're saying is resonating to them. Because again, I'll get a lot of emails and LinkedIn requests and messages, and I can tell if it's not AI, it's not someone that's spent a lot of time. I'll sound harsh here, but if I don't know you and you're not spending a lot of time and reaching out, I have 5,700 unread emails. It's probably not a response you're getting. I know that sounds harsh, but I'm just trying to be real.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
Um,
Oh, thank you.
hey, Timothy Bonner has a question. Warren.
Yeah, Timothy, go ahead.
Hey, how's it going, Warren? I've got a few questions for you. Are you still in Tampa for my first question, or have you moved on?
I am not. I still got a place in Tampa, but I moved to Los Angeles. Sorry, I should have said that. I'm in Los Angeles right now for the company I'm working with. Which, oh, by the way, if you want the opportunity, like, I want to work remote. I don't want to move. I don't want to do this. Listen, like, man, like, you gotta concede. I honestly, I don't want to really be in LA. I'd rather be in Tampa. But guess what? This is an amazing opportunity, and I did it. Go ahead.
Sweet. Follow-on question. At SOCOM, what director or position were you at while you're at SOCOM?
Yeah, I was in the J3X over at SOCOM. If you're familiar there on the third deck. Yep. Okay. I was a J3X guy. And if you're thumbs up, you knew what I was doing.
Yep, yep. And then my last question. As you were getting out, you were pivoting, you didn't really know what you were going to do. Similar to myself, were you more financially stable as far as like for myself, I'm a single income household, so like I'm retiring, going into something completely new, which I still haven't completely figured out. So like for me, there's a lot of pressure being the sole provider for the household. Uh, so what was there a little bit of a buffer? Are you married? Did your wife have a job? So there's a little bit of a buffer there, or were you really taking that leap of faith?
Yeah, I'll be real honest with my personal arrangement at that point because I think a lot of us are going through this. So I'm going to open up. I was a single income household. I was also in the process of getting divorced. I had three children, and the soon-to-be ex was not going to be financially secure for a period of time, a long period of time. So not only did, very similar to you, Timothy, did I not know what I wanted to do? Did I not know where I was going? I had to now pretty much support, one and a half households, the half being whatever I could carve out for myself to have the kids over. So I say this and I open up to let you all know, right? Like yeah, it's scary. I get it, right? And believe me, I was, and the government was offering me that J3X shop was offering me positions, but again, as scared as I was, I took the leap to go to a private sector. I'm very glad. Again, a lot of my friends are still doing it and they love it. So it's not a hit. This is me personally. I am beyond thankful that I was willing to accept the risk and take the leap. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. Um, any other questions? If not, I have like potential minefields as you go into this and some other stuff to talk about. But I love the questions. I can keep doing this the rest of the time. Okay. Before I go into potential minefields, because it's going to get a little harsh, right? I do want to talk about 8 years in the private industry and what everyone in this call brings. And I promise you, you bring it and you're going to see it when you get to the private sector. You hear this all the time, leadership. You are going to enter a private sector that is woefully lacking in fundamental leadership, and you are going to excel at it based on, our military collectively, don't care what uniform you wear, right? The servant leadership of, hey, guess what? If I have people that, I'm responsible for, they eat first, I eat last. I'm going to pour myself into my team as a manager leader to make sure they have every resource they need to be successful. You will not see that in private sector. And that just inherent ability you have for basic leadership for your team is going to serve you very well. Selfless. We are selfless people, right? It's all about the person to the left and right of me. It's not about who's above me or, it's all about left and right. That is not a culture you will see a lot in the private sector, and it will separate everyone on this call as you get established in your first job. Another one, because I'm going to get harsh in a second about things we don't do. Decision making. I am amazed in the private sector that the wringing of hands that I don't have 100% of the information I need to make a decision. I know everyone on this call is probably chuckling because I never in the military had 100% of the information I needed to make a decision. We are very well positioned to say, I have the information I have. I'm going to make a decision. I don't know if it's the right decision, but I know doing nothing is the wrong decision. So I'm just going to go do it. That is not natural for private sector folks. And lastly, the resilience and discipline. Don't belittle that, right? Like our 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 growth of resilience and discipline that we got in the military is going to serve you well. You know, there's a lot of people in the private sector, they get knocked down, they lose. And I tell people, I walk out of this building losing more than I win. But I have the discipline that the Marine Corps and other services give you to know, okay, I'm going to go home. I'm going to lick my wounds. I'm going to figure out, could I do it better? But I'm getting back off the canvas and I'm going to show up even earlier tomorrow to get after it. That is not a trait you're going to find very often in the private sector. And it's just part of our fiber that we grew into. Those things, when you get into, and I'll talk about getting into a private sector company and you get a position, you're going to see that just inherently. You're just going to have it and other people don't, and it's going to separate yourself. Let me talk about potential minefields because I did take time, over the last few days thinking about this. Some of this may sound harsh, but it's not, right? It's meant to give you perspective from now a private sector person that has been doing this for 8 years. The first thing I tell my friends who are retiring or getting out after however many years, um, don't go to SeaWorld, stand up and get applauded and think that matters in an interview. They are personally incredibly appreciative of the sacrifices that you have made. They are. When it comes to the interview room, they don't care. So don't misperceive that personal appreciation for professional appreciation. And I know that sounds harsh, but every interview, every conversation, you have to prove ROI. That's all it's about in the private sector. Can I get a return on investment? And depending on your role you're going to serve, that could be a function, that could be an objective, that could be revenue, whatever it is, right? But for the position that you are interviewing for, how am I going to make this manager, this leader, this team more effective and prove that I can increase their overall objectives? That's all you're trying to do. If you're talking about tie in what you did in the military, but if that's all you do, they don't understand it. And I'll give you an example. When I was at Icon, a former Top Gun commanding officer came to interview for a position that I had open once I was, VP of sales and marketing. Listen, Top Gun CEO, very accomplished, way more accomplished than I ever was in the military, right? He didn't even get a second interview. All he talked about was his previous experiences in a Top Gun, which is fascinating that I'm not running Top Gun. Like you're not speaking to me. Now, if you can tie those experiences into my job description and my team and my goals and how you're going to use those, but more so focused on me, and I say that on my company, I'm interested. But he never did that. He never made the correlation. It was just about him and his successes and what he did. So value for the company. My kids, and I have five of them, are probably rolling their eyes right now. But I tell also my friends transitioning, the windshield is 20 times bigger than the rearview mirror for a purpose. Stop looking back, right? You can glance at the rearview mirror, harken back and think, favorably of all the friends and the experiences and things you've done, but the windshield's bigger for a reason. You got to look forward. And if you keep focusing on what you did and not what you want to do and where you want to be, you're never going to get there. And I see that a lot from transitioning military, which really goes into you have to reinvent yourself. Even if you're going to stay in the government or something like that, you really have to reinvent yourself because it is a different world and it's scary. Like Timothy, you and I were talking about, it is like 22 years. All I knew was the Marine Corps outside of, waitering jobs and working in factories, right? That's all I knew. So you really have to reinvent yourself, not lose yourself, but reinvent yourself as you go into this next phase. Um, and then I was going to talk about kind of initial self-worth. And Derek, that goes back to what we were talking about. you have to recognize that the first opportunity you take is not going to be your ideal opportunity. Take it because you see the growth path for that ideal opportunity, right? And it's not going to be, within the first day or first week, but I promise you, if you say, okay, I'm willing to eat a little humble pie, I'm willing to take that salary, I'm willing to take that role because I see what this company's offering and where they're going and the team I'm going to be a part of. And I promise you, if you go and improve yourself, you're going to turn around within 3 or 4 years and be like, how did I even get here? So again, with all that kind of minefield stuff, right? I go back again to when you have the right opportunity, it's not going to be perfect. Jump and take the leap. I'll pause there and see if anyone has any questions or debate me or curse at me for some of the things I just mentioned. All right. And I can't see any questions.
Lord,
Carp,
I'm
help
not
me
seeing
out.
any questions on the
Okay.
board right now. Um, but I was wondering, could you spend some time talking about the company you work out right now,
Oh,
Skyryse?
yeah.
Uh, I've looked at the website, I've seen some of the stuff on LinkedIn. It looks like some phenomenal stuff you're doing, and I think that the crowd would be interested to hear about that.
Yeah, yeah, and stop me if I'm going too far, right? Because now I'll put like a sales and marketing hat on because that's what I run. So we're still I say startup. The company's been around 10 years, but it's significant tech, and I'll explain it in a bit. But we are pre-revenue. We're so what Skyrise, and by the way, size of team, about 150 folks. We're based out of SoCal. We got a couple hangars at a couple airfields. We have an integration facility. Then we have the headquarters where I'm sitting at now. About 85% engineers. There's a lot of PhDs walking around. I'm an 880 SAT, non-PhD, non-engineering guy. So I'm one of the few oddballs walking around this place. And what we have built is, I said, a software hardware stack. And I know not everyone here is involved in aerospace, so I'll talk somewhat high level. We basically gut traditional aircraft, which are mechanical linkages, cables. If you go into a Black Hawk today, it's mechanical linkages everywhere, right? If you go into a Phenom 300 private jet, it's cables. Like it's literally like when we go into our cars are way more sophisticated in a lot of ways than what the aircraft we're flying, unless you're talking, fourth, fifth generation fighters, you name it. So what the company has developed, and it's really neat, is you gut all of that antiquated mechanical cables, and you put in there a digital backbone. It has a fly-by-wire architecture to it. It has levels of automation. It's essentially, and the best analogy is compared to my 1974 Dodge Dart, it's the Tesla. I get people saying all the time, I hate Tesla. Fine, hate them, love them, you name it, whatever. I'll tell you, the automobile industry, a Dodge Ram looks different today than it looked like 10 years ago because Tesla and companies like that forced them to a level of automation and a level of technology they weren't willing to go themselves. We are essentially doing that in the aerospace market. We are in, and I can explain investment rounds, but we're in a Series C investment round by the end of this month. And don't put this on Facebook yet because my CEO would kill me, but we'll be valued at over $1 billion as a company. So we enter what's called unicorn status. So we're really changing the way aircraft are flown, the automation in aircraft, as well as what is really the makeup of the aircraft outside of the rivets, and the power plant and transmission. We gut everything else. Last thing I'll say is what we do, because we have technology like that. You want to be dual piloted, great. You want to be single piloted, we can do that. You want to be ground command control station, we can do that. You want to be fully automated, just press a button and let it take its route and fly, we can do that. And I think the best analogy I can give to that is like an iPhone, right? When it's airdrop in an operating system. So once you have commonality of an operating system, the communication, the links, the networking is almost seamless. And then last thing, and then I'll pause and I'll see, Carp, what questions you have. one of the phenomenal things this company has done is if you look at traditional avionics bays and aircraft, what I mean by, avionics bays, all the parts and electronics and pieces that go into an aircraft. Smaller aircraft, military aircraft still have avionics closets. An Airbus commercial liner has a room of electronics. All of our technology is put almost essentially into a toaster box. So when I'm talking to investors or private sector folks, I'm like, when I grew up, think of the mainframe computer, right? Now I have a cell phone. I could never have imagined this. Now I have a cell phone with 100 times the capability, if not more, and about 100 times the size difference. And that's also what we're doing is Moore's laws, we've condensed all that technology into something that can fit really into any aircraft. Um, we're in the growth stage right now. So again, we just finished a round of funding. We're approaching certification with the FAA next year. And with that, we are, as we go into 2026, I always have to pause. I forget what year I'm in. We'll grow as a company, both in the engineering operations as well as, flight department and hopefully the sales and marketing department so I can get more people on the team. I'll pause there and see if there's any questions. All right. Um, if I can, and then I'll you see what question wrap up. And Derek, you and I talked about this a little bit, but I want to, and I hated this when I was in your position. I hated hearing about this. And I probably actually still do, but I want to go back to the networking and prospecting because outside the minefields of, understanding that you're entering a private sector that appreciates the sacrifice, but really doesn't care when it comes to an interview. They care about how you're going to benefit them. It's I hate to say this, it's a selfish kind of portion of life, right? But outside of that, the networking and prospecting, right? I will say, because I was a little harsh, people do want to help, right? But that help's only going to come if you're asking for it. Because as I mentioned, thousands and thousands of unread emails, people are really busy in the private sector. I was blown away by how busy, and if you want to ask me about this, how stressful it is. So they're not going to find you, but they do want to help, right? Especially, I'll use Carp for an example, right? He reaches out to me, of course I want to help him, right? And when I see that because of our ties and what we've, done together, I'm going to. But if it's someone even loosely connected, I do want to help. But I might not get back to you the first time. So repeat those reach outs. And I also say, like we talked about a little, Derek, if you have and just don't have one ideal job, right? Like you got to stretch that out because if you're just targeting one job at one company, I'm not saying you're not going to get it, but man, those are slim odds, right? So really grow that aperture and be willing to accept that maybe I'm at a company that wasn't my first choice, maybe it's my fifth choice. But what I'm going to do is now get on my resume that, oh yeah, not only was I very successful during my military career, I jumped in the private sector and I did this job and I grew in this job and that's huge, right? But take that fifth opportunity. But my point is, grow that aperture and really, like I said, prospect and strategize the people around that, right? Go on to LinkedIn, find out, hey, Warren's actually a connection with someone in that company. I'm going to reach out because I had to listen to him for 45 minutes one day. I'm going to reach out and say, hey, would you mind introducing me? Or what do you know about this? People do want to help, but you got to be proactive. And I know it stinks, but it almost becomes, if not a full-time job, a part-time job on the side of doing this. And again, you'll get way more no's than you and way more ignores than you get yeses. That's fine. That's not them being rude. It's just the inundation that, especially if you look at leaders in the private sector, the inundation we have on a daily basis that we cannot accomplish or get to everything we want to get to on any given day. The last thing I'll say, well, there's two more things when I say any given day. Be prepared to work, right? Like, so, I mean, it's different workloads, right? The military is extremely stressful. But I will tell you, I probably haven't had a day with no work. I don't know. I would say since I left, but let's say in the last, definitely in the last 2 years, I've worked every day, right, in some way. So just realize it's a different culture. Last thing I'll say about interviews, interview a lot. I know especially if you're an introvert and it's not what you want to do. You got to go out and do it, right? Because you look good on a resume. You have a lot of skill sets that and people are interested in, and they are interested in military people, right? Because of all those attributes I talked about, and they know that, by the way. They know, hey, this person was military. They're disciplined. They're hard workers. They're great teammates. They're great leaders. They know that. So you get in the resume, but you got to interview a lot. And again, you're going to get rejected way more than you get accepted. Yeah, when I'm always passively looking. I get reached out by recruiters all the time. I may have an interview with the CEO of a company or a board member, and they say no. That's fine, right? That's not a hit on me. It's just not the right fit. So don't take it personally, and don't let that devalue what you will bring to the private sector. It just wasn't a right fit, but you got to get out and do it. And every interview, and I know you've heard this, is a lesson. So even if it's a job that you're like, I'm really not interested, take the interview, do the interview, right? Hone in your messaging. And you might be surprised. You go in for there and you realize, wow, that is something I actually want to take advantage of. But again, rejection, losses, ignores are part of the private sector. Prospect, reach out, network all the time. And if anyone invites you in for an interview, take it, whether it's virtual or in person. Don't be shy because it's going to take way more than one unless you're very fortunate, in which case I hope everyone is. Um, all right. I'll pause there and see if anyone has any questions on interviews or networking or prospecting.
Warren, I got a question. You said that Skyryse is getting ready to grow, but you also said that like it's 85% engineers and doctors. But as you grow, you're going to hire other roles, correct?
100%. So the engineers and the PhDs don't want to hear this, and there's always a role, right? Because we are expanding in different aircraft. So we are an engineering company in large part, right? But the operational side of this, the flight training, the flight operations, the maintenance support, the client support, the customer success, the sales and marketing, and other general positions, HR as we continue to grow, right? Will also finance, you name it. So and if we're 85% engineers right now, don't quote me on this, but I would say if you look at it, I said 2 years from now, we're probably 65, 70% engineers because the one thing that I caution companies like this that build products is they often get sucked into this is what we do, and if we build it, everyone's going to love it. And I tell them that that's not the case. We are who our clients say we are, and in order to do that, we need to grow our commercial footprint to understand exactly what the industry, the market, and our clients want us to be. And if we want to make a lot of money, that's what we become. Because if you just say, well, that's not us, well, we can say that's not us out of principle, and we can all be out of a job here in a couple of years.
Andrew's got a question.
Hey, good morning, sir. I just had a quick question. You said about interviews and stuff like that. What do you like to see when it comes to interviews? Like when a person comes on and talks to you, comes on and interviews for a job, what like sparks your interest? And it's like, hey, I need that guy.
Yeah. First, and again, this is probably more my background, right? But energy and cultural fit, right? Hey, listen, I know it sounds, well, of course I will be, right? You'd be surprised how many people come in. There's actually three things, remind me. You'd be surprised at how many people come in and you're like, hey man, are you excited or not? Like, do you want this or not? Because they just put off an energy that and my perception is that if they do that, if this is what they're bringing to an interview, if this is what they're bringing into for 2 hours for us to start paying you, what are you going to do once you're in the position, right? So, again, it sounds mom and apple pie, but high energy, smile, right? Act like you want to be there. And I know you're like, of course people do. You'd be surprised, right? Second thing is you know, like me moving to LA, and not everyone has to move to LA. That's probably an extreme, right? Be willing, if it's an opportunity you want, be willing to compromise, right? There's, it's probably not going to be perfect, but if it's what you want, and I'll give you an example. I was interviewing back when I was in Tampa for a sales position, and the individual I was interviewing, qualified. I'm on the phone, and the person said, and I know this will probably shock a lot of, but it's going to shock this audience probably, but he said, are you guys on site? And I said, yeah, we are an on-site company. And he said, well, that's a 30-minute drive both ways. I mean, do I have to be on site? Can I just come in a couple days of the week? I stopped the interview and I said, listen, the interview's over, right? But what I do want to tell you is, if someone's offering you an opportunity that you want, right? Like, you'd walk here, right? You do whatever you could to take the opportunity. So what I mean by that is, man, if you got an opportunity you really like and you're interviewing, right, be accommodating to the company. And here's more important, I think, from everything. Do the research and have an answer. You'd be surprised at how many times I would ask people, and I'm not in cybersecurity, right? But hey, tell me how you would approach this. And obviously, it's something that's probably on our website. That's probably something we're doing, and they kind of willy-nilly, and they don't really have anything concrete. Have an answer. I'm not expecting that answer to be right. I want to hear the logic in your thought process that got you to that answer. It's like you tell your kids when you're growing up, don't just give me the answer in math, show me your work, right? So don't be afraid of giving a concrete answer. Most people know that you don't know enough about the product, the company, whatever, to give an answer that's going to take that company into $1 trillion status. That's not what they're looking for. Can you commit that says, I've done the research, I have spent time assessing, I have put logic to this, and here is my response. If you can do that for most questions that get asked of you, you will be way up on your competition, because most people just kind of generally put an answer out there. And I don't know if it's because they don't want to commit, or they're afraid it's going to be a wrong answer. It's probably going to be the wrong answer. I don't care. I just want to hear that you've taken time and you've thought about it, and you have a logic behind you. That somewhat answer the question? If not, you can ask it a different way.
No, yes, sir. No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on the interview aspect of this? All right.
Not
Let me go.
seeing any.
That's fine. No worries. Let me go through my notes, make sure I capture everything I want to talk about. Again, I don't want to eat up more time if you guys don't. Yep. Misplaced. Got it. No, I think that's about all I got. Again, and Carp, if there's a topic I missed or something you want me to jump on, please let me know.
No, Warren, we greatly appreciate your time. If I could have everybody in the group, if anybody is interested in a company like Skyryse, just throw one in the chat, please. Uh, and Warren, appreciate all the advice that you gave to everybody today. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say, not just companies like Skyryse, right, but aerospace. The last thing I'll do, and I didn't really talk about it, is I remember when I was transitioning, a lot of people were talking about, I'm going to start my own company. I've done that. If anyone wants advice on or has a question right now that's like, hey, what was that like? What do you think? I can answer that as well. So aerospace startups, as well as, hey, you start your own company. It's the American dream. What do you think? Let me know as well, or you can ask a question now. Cool.
All
All
right.
right, Ted. I sincerely appreciate it, brother. Hey, and
No,
thank you
thank
for
you.
everyone. Seriously, thank you. And I mean it. Thanks for your service. It's great connecting. And last thing I'll say, and I'll let you guys jump off. Please, if you need my information, Ted has it. Reach out to him, get my information. Let me know